Hello and good evening. Welcome to Let's Talk Shop with Russ. I think we have a very, very interesting show tonight. We've got Bob from the Gwinnett Woodworkers. That's the woodworking up in Georgia that he belongs to, woodworking group. And he is pretty well an expert on the Dewalt Scroll Saw, the 788. So we're going to be talking to him tonight. And he's going to give us some pointers and talk about the 788 tonight, which is great. Before we get started with that, let me remind you that the Scroll Saw Artist Challenge is still ongoing till the 5th of November. I'm going to try, I know it's kind of late, but I'm going to try to get a little video out and up on my YouTube channel about it. We've already got like 3 or 4 entries, and all of them are picture entries. So I'm trying to, I haven't forgot about you guys that sent me picture. Just been busy the last few days. Matter of fact, I don't know if y'all have ever heard of this place. It's called Infinity, and it's like as big as a Walmart, but everywhere you look is trampolines, but they're all like built into the floor. The floor is like off the ground. And my grandson's birthday was there today, and so fat boy didn't get on a trampoline. Trust me, this boy didn't get on no trampoline. But they got walkways in between them, so you can walk around. They got a section for little kids, and my grandson's 9, so he's up there with the bigger kids. But anyway, man, it wore my butt out. I spent like 4 hours there. When I got home, I was dragging. So yeah, I was a tired whipped puppy. So, but anyway, I've never seen anything like that. It was pretty cool. They have like they do it like almost like games. They have guys that walk around in striped shirts that are called referees, and they're the keep everybody in line and keep everybody from getting in trouble. They have a trampoline dodgeball. I think that was pretty cool. They got these big nets, and you get in there and get on there, and you get a team together, and you hop around on the trampolines to avoid getting hit by the dodgeball. So pretty cool. Let me talk about my wonderful sponsors before we go any further, and they are Devobal Technologies. For web design, development, hosting, visit devobal.com. FastCap, innovative products for the professional woodworker. Go to fastcap.com. Rockler, 60 years in woodworking. Create with confidence. Visit rockler.com. And Bearwood Supply Company, your best choice for hard-to-find woodworking supplies. Go to bearwood.com. Klingspor, the sanding specialist, woodworkingshop.com. And Seiko, the scroll saw specialist, seiko.com. And I'm really upset that I'm not going to be able to be at the Klingspor extravaganza. Mike Klingspor got in contact with me, and I told him I couldn't come this year. It's too close to my hernia surgery, and I probably could go for that, but like I said, I've spent a lot of money on my roof this year getting it put on. So between the two, I'm not going to be able to go tonight or next week. It's actually next week. Yeah. So just not going to make it. Scroll saw contest. Let me talk about the Dave Hart's out there in the chat. Patrick's Woodshop. Hello, Patrick. Steve Carmichael is out there in the chat. Michelle Marcoux, Bob Lee, Dan Inge, Jim Bashirs. All of these guys are out there in the chat waiting, which is real good. And if you're out there in the chat, don't forget, give me a thumbs up if you don't mind. Like the video or like the show tonight. I'd appreciate it. Yeah, I've been having a lot of success with a lot of thumbs up for the show, and I really appreciate all you guys doing that for me. So don't forget to give me a thumbs up. Thank you very, very much. Awesome Wood Things. Matt Haas is out there in the chat also. Okay, so let's go down the line and let's have everybody introduce themselves. And we'll start on my left this time, and that is Miss Brenda. Introduce yourself.
Thanks, Russ. I'm Brenda G of Brenda G's Designs. You'll find me all over the internet as Brenda G's Designs. I'm on Etsy, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, Patreon, probably a bunch of other places I forgot about. But yeah, you'll find me as Brenda G's Designs.
Great. Thanks for being here. Chris Ahern.
Hey guys, Chris here from the Old Cranky Workshop from up in Boston, the home of the American League Division champs and soon to be World Series champs. Anyways, you can find me on Facebook and on YouTube, and that's about it. I can't even keep track of those. So.
All right. Thank you for being here. And Dixon.
Hey everybody. It's good to be here and see everybody again. This is Dixon Hoffman from Hoffman Signs and Decals. Sometimes you'll see me on Facebook, and that's about it.
Great. Have you, John Schaffner?
Good evening, everyone. John Schaffner here from Soggy Central New York. You can find me on Facebook, and I have a little presence on YouTube. Check that out. Not much there. It's quite old, but it's there.
Cool. And I got your thing up on the for the scroll saw challenge.
Yes, I see that. Yep. It's a medium flat rate box. I don't know if I'm going to send like assortment. I'm shooting for an assortment of different kinds of woods. So
yep. Great. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yep.
Al Forte. Yes, it's you. Your turn.
Yeah, I had to find the button because I wasn't prepared, obviously. It's great to be here, folks. My name's Al Forte, Odessa Woodworking and Maker Shop on YouTube and on Twitch, Kilroy79763, or you can look for me as Kilroy79763 all over the world. I'll pop up in the weirdest places. Anyway, great to be here. And I want to say this much. It's great to have another Starfleet officer out in the chat. Awesome Wood Things, Matt.
How do you know I'm not a Starfleet officer?
You got a red shirt on.
I got your red shirt.
And you're a cadet. You're a cadet in my no wait. I promoted you to lieutenant. You're a lieutenant, so you are an officer.
Okay.
The red shirts are usually the first to go, though.
The red shirts are the best. All the other guys are wimps.
The only one is Scotty.
The red shirts are expendable, right?
Yeah. All right, Paul.
Hey, for once, I wasn't the one that wasn't ready.
Nope, you were ready.
No. Just say hi to everybody out there in the chat. I'm Paul Corliss for Paul's Messy Workshop. That's Paul's Messy Workshop on YouTube and Instagram and wherever else you might see me. And appreciate you having me on, Russ. And unfortunately, I've got to leave this warm Florida weather pretty soon and go back up to Michigan, where right now I think it's 38 degrees.
That's cold. You know, I am upset, though, if we can't at least have maybe sneak in a lunch or something. Maybe if I have to drive up towards you more, because me and my wife just figured it out the other day after we, by the way, y'all, we had a dinner with Paul and his wife, Nancy. And lo and behold, my wife's named Nancy. So the other night at, guess where? Where's the favorite place?
Carrabba's.
Carrabba's, yes. We had it at Carrabba's. But anyway, you know what? Lo and behold, we forgot to get a pictures together.
I thought of that afterwards.
I know. I did too after I was about a mile away. I was thinking, I almost was tempted to call you and say, turn around, come back, let's get a picture.
Hey, I'd have done it.
Yeah, I probably should have now because y'all are leaving early and we might not get to see each other before you leave.
Yeah.
But if you can work it out, I'll drive further north. That's not a problem. Just let me know.
Okay, I'll check.
Yeah, check and see if y'all can work it out. But yeah, we had.
I got a suggestion.
Why
don't you take a picture of both sites and then Photoshop them together, and you'll be standing there like this, okay? And
yeah,
Paul will be like that. And
I got a picture with Russ from back at the Tampa Woodworking Show,
Yep.
what, 3 years ago?
Yep.
And we could just Photoshop our wives in.
Yeah, we could put our wives in. Yeah, no, it was, and that was a shame because I would have liked to have got a picture with all of us. Had like the lady, one of the ladies, the waitresses or whatever, took a picture of all of us together. But yeah, hopefully we can work that out. I mean, I understand y'all. If not, if y'all have to go back a little early, how's your? We'll talk about that later. We'll get into that because
okay, all right.
We'll cut down on the show time. Anyway, the man of the hour is Bob. I think I pronounced it right. Brokaw.
You mean there's another Bob on here?
No, Brokaw. Is that how you pronounce it?
That's correct. Yep.
Great. This is Bob, and you're one of the members of the Gwinnett Woodworkers.
Yeah, I was one of the members. Oh, I guess I've been with them about 16, 17 years.
Wow, pretty good, pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. We used to meet about 5 or 10 minutes away from my house, and then we kind of got disinvited from that store. They had a management change there, so then about that time was when David Hughes was building up his new place there on Jimmy Carter. So we saw he had planned ahead and added a conference room, or added a classroom in the back of the retail space. We kind of thought, I wonder what his plans are for that. So we just kind of invited ourselves because he was looking for somebody to occupy that space.
Well, that's good. Now,
We've been with him for, I guess it's about 9 or 10 years.
Is there any other woodworking club that use that classroom, or is just y'all are the only ones?
There's several others in the area. The next big one is the Georgia Guild. They used to be quite a bit larger than we are, but I think we may be slightly ahead of them now.
Right. How many? You were telling me the other night. How many members do y'all have?
I think we probably peaked out at about 160.
That's a good sized club.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're currently sitting maybe around 140.
Yeah.
A lot of people retired, and
I think we've probably, the Lakeland Woodworking Club I belong to has probably got, I'm going to say 40 plus members, but actually, well, no, between 40 and 50. And then, but only about 20, 25 actually show up to the, every Wednesday, or it's not every Wednesday night. It's the first Wednesday night of every month is the meeting. So about 20, 25 actually show up. We've had more than that, but, and we've had less than that, but, that's a good 20, 25 is a good, but that's a pretty good turnout when you get about we're approaching, half. That's not too bad, but we're a lot smaller club.
Yeah. At today's meeting, we had our turning event. We had, I think there were 38 people there for that one to learn how to turn custom handles for awls.
Cool. All right, let's get into the DW788. Now, guys out there in the chat, if you have questions, and guys on the panel, be sure to ask them. So take it away and let us know or what you want to talk about and show us.
Well, probably first off, to stimulate a little conversation here, we'll rotate the camera around and refocus that thing.
That is cool.
Yeah, that's usually an attention getter when I go teach a class. It's
the first time I tore one apart, I thought it was amazing the little amount of movement in the back, how it transferred to the front, and how much movement up and down it is on the front.
Yeah.
Now that's the up and down movement on the front of what, about 3/4 of an inch?
No, it you can, depending on adjustments and so forth, you can actually get about an 1.25 inches out of it.
Oh wow! I didn't realize you get that much.
Oh yeah.
No, I know it's between the arms. No, I'm talking about the actual blade movement. Isn't that only about 3/4 of an inch?
Yeah, I think you're right. It's about 3/4 of an inch.
Yeah.
But I know Hans usually hits me up and wants me to adjust his saw and so forth, so he can get those pretty large items in between the clamps.
Right.
On the machine, so that he can do some of those big 3D cuts that he likes to do.
Okay.
And that, since you talk about that mechanism in the rear, let's see if I can turn my world around here so I can catch that part.
Right. This is the part you know most of the time people won't get to see. So. Go ahead and explain that. What's happening?
Okay. The motion starts out with a eccentric shaft on the end of a variable speed AC motor. So they use a, let's see, down there in the bottom of the picture. Let's see, I was trying to.
Yeah, there's a circuit board.
You can see the where the screwdriver point is moving around. I'm trying to avoid hitting the thing so I don't wind up.
The panel is hiding all that, but
The what now?
I saw it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the panel's hiding out, but we can tell where it's at. Yeah.
Yeah. But at any rate, it's a frequency controller. I have had several different guys, myself included. I've got electrical engineering and manufacturing engineering in my background. And we've had a number of people stare at an oscilloscope trying to figure out what kind of waveform that little controller board is putting out as you change speed, and it's a mystery.
Is it a pulse width modulated waveform, or is it does it climb up, or?
Well, when you're looking at the waveform, you're changing speed, and the only thing that changes is the width of the pulse, and not enough to justify the amount of speed difference. So that's the part that's a mystery.
Excuse me for just a second, Russ. We had a thing out in the chat. Can we hide the panel so they can see better?
Can we hide? I don't know if you can hide the whole panel.
You mean to make the image bigger?
Yeah.
Because the panel hides like where the circuit board is. They can't.
You can just, if you don't mind, Bob, just drop the camera down a little bit.
Yep, that's what I was headed for.
There you go, Bob. There you go.
Thank you.
It's a little too low now. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I had to. I had the camera on a clamp on a.
That's great. That's great.
Light. Yeah. Now you got full view of the
Circuit board. Yep.
circuit board there.
Thank you.
When you're now you've worked on quite a few of these. How many have you that's come in for you to repair? Does this circuit board go out quite often, or is that one of the few things in the saw that it actually ever goes out?
Out of the 85 saws that I've repaired, I've had one bad circuit board.
Right. Okay.
And that bad circuit board was brought on by the owner of the saw, having taken the thing over to the Dewalt Service Center, and they're on Jimmy Carter here in Norcross, and he managed to short out the brushes.
No.
And actually,
The service center did this?
Hmm?
The service center shorted out the brushes?
Yes. And then declared it was irreparable. Pardon me while I fetch my screwdriver here.
No problem. That wouldn't be the first time that.
What does one of those boards run?
They're, I think they're about $150.
And the saw is what?
Well, you catch it on sale right now. For instance, Grizzly has it on sale with the stand and the light for $399. So yeah, $400 is a really good price on sale. So
who's got it on sale, Russ?
Grizzly. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've got the Dewalt saw with the stand and the light for $399.
Yeah, that is quite a bargain.
Yeah, that is.
Okay, now then what we were talking about is the variable speed. All that it does there when you change the variable speed is it changes the speed of the motor, which makes this eccentric shaft run faster. And then there's a connecting rod between the eccentric shaft and this vertical rocker that's right here. And let's see, I probably need to raise the camera a little bit for you to catch the entirety of that.
Yep.
Yeah. Good.
Now then, this mechanism in here is one of the more frequent parts to go bad in one of these saws. That is primarily because in this small end of this connecting rod, like in a type 2 that is not lubricated from the factory, that is usually the first place where the lubrication expires.
Right. That's what went when I had to work on my Delta that I took apart and never put it back together again. That's what went bad in mine, was that bearing there on that end. Same thing. And if there was any lubrication in there, it was so minute you would have never known.
The only lubrication that is in there on a type 2 from the factory is usually the bearing supplier on those is INA. They're over in Germany, and they put just enough lubrication in there to keep the needle bearings from falling out.
Yeah.
And that's
Oh, so
enough
then
lubrication
that
for the
is
wall.
so then that is a needle bearing, not just a bushing.
Yeah, it's a needle bearing with a hardened sleeve going through the center of it, and then at various points through here, like on this vertical rocker that you see moving here, what happens there is that casting with this bolt that's right here, the casting gets pinched and compressed, and that's what keeps that bushing in place, and keeps everything that is supposed to be tight, keeps it tight. Now then, when the lubrication fails in this thing, what winds up happening is the needle bearings start pounding against the bushing that's in there, starts making its own oxide, and you start to have a failure. And first thing that'll usually wind up happening is the bushing will start moving back and forth in the slot. And then as that persists, you wind up taking what would have been about I think this is a $55 part here for that connecting rod. You wind up involving this vertical rocker here, which is about an $85 part, because you have slotted the holes here.
Right.
So if you start hearing noises in one of these things, it's best to address it real soon. Otherwise, it's going to get more expensive.
Right. Yeah. It's not going to get better.
Yeah.
We got our first question that I've seen out there. Woody Walnut says, "Mine rattles when I turn the speed up. Why is that?"
Speed near the top speed is before it starts rattling.
Is it? We'll wait to see if he answers that.
Somewhere between 80% and 100.
Yes.
That was a yes?
Yes.
Okay. Generally, what that is caused by, let me see if I didn't take this machine far enough apart yet to be able to show you that part. Let's see if I can get a view of it going here. Okay. Right here is a sliding wedge, and this thing is connected with a screw mechanism to the tensioning handle on the front of the machine. So when you pull that tensioning handle around to make the blade tighter, what you're doing is you're drawing this wedge further forward against this plate right here. So what that's doing is that's raising the arm to increase tension on the blade. What you're also doing at that point, see if I can involve another loose part. Okay, this is an extra casting from the front of the machine. It's basically your upper rocker assembly. And what winds up happening is this, okay, let me move this a little bit. But what winds up happening is this counterweight that's right here winds up slapping the bottom of that mechanism that tensions the blade. So what I have found is that when I take the machine apart, whenever I have to service one, there's one part that I take out and I grind the underside of it. I grind a relief in there. You know, it doesn't hurt anything, but it allows you an extra little bit of space there where those parts don't kiss each other. That's most of the time that's where the rattle comes from.
Right.
The other percentage of the time is when the bearings are starting to go bad. They will get just enough slop in them that it'll allow it to over travel and cause a knock at the higher speeds. So it could be either one of those. One of the ways that he can tell, let me, I got this set up and got things aimed right here. Let's see if I can show this. Okay, what I'm doing here is with the blade loose completely, what I will typically do when I analyze one of these is I will see how much this lower rocker will move before you start to move any of this other mechanism here. You're detecting how much slop there is in this collection of bearings and sleeves and all that all the way to the rear. You don't even have to have this part of the machine exposed to be able to tell this. The idea is that you're supposed to rock this back and forth just a little bit, and then this upper rocker, you should notice it starting to move. If one moves without the other one moving, then that means you got some loose parts in the path. So you need to start addressing that.
In other words, some of the bearings in the one of them are wore out enough that it's causing enough slop.
Yes.
Yeah. So
exactly.
Yep. Jim,
now, when you remove this cover from the side back here, and you operate this in a mode like what I've got here, and you start to move that front rocker there, and you start looking here, you can usually identify whether the slop that you're getting is this bearing or both. And if you see this vertical rocker moving without this motor shaft moving, that's a telltale that this connecting rod is bad. Now you can replace most of the bearings in the machine. This one, this big one in here, another one here, there's about 12 of the same size bearing, like here, and 5 on each rocker in the front. Unfortunately, and I really got in a knockdown drag out with the Dewalt engineers over this, is this connecting rod here seems to have a replaceable bearing. The only thing is they do not have a replacement sleeve to go in it. You cannot get the sleeve separately. You got to order the whole connecting rod in order to get the sleeve.
And
okay.
They got a couple of questions out there real quick. Driveway Workshop, or Jim Bashir says, is any lubrication recommended? Jim, I think what you mean is, should you lubricate it frequently? And I would say yes. What do you say, Bob?
He's probably asking, I'm thinking about a particular brand of lubrication.
Okay.
More than consistency.
Then what would you recommend?
Grab my tube of lube. I spent a number of years building a conveyor system for a computer factory for IBM. Whoops, get this thing set down here. And Well, I couldn't see anything.
Disc brake, huh? Wheel bearing.
Yeah, wheel bearing. That's what I
It's
use.
basically wheel bearing grease is what it is.
Yeah. And it's synthetic too.
Yes, that seems to last a little bit better or stay around longer.
Cool.
One of the things that I learned while I was working on that conveyor equipment is that we had some fairly high-speed chains in there with connected sprockets and whatnot. And the experience I was having was whatever lubrication you put on there would sling off. And I had a couple of machinists working for me, and I handed them, well, we started doing an evaluation on the lubrication. So we would put a specific lube on there, run it for a while, and I would give the chain to one of my machinists and say, okay, cut it apart and let's see how much lube is left. And what I found out is that anything that is classified as an oil slings off. And what I found out is oil will run away from heat.
Right.
And greases, especially like wheel bearing grease, it was my experience that they migrate toward heat. So this one vendor that I had down in the area, he heard I was having a problem, so he came along and he brought about 3 containers of grease along. And you guys have probably done enough fishing and so forth. You've seen some of these plastic worms that kind of look like those multiple colors of brown, really yucky looking color and so forth. Well, this grease looked just like that. And I put some of that stuff on there, and I told the maintenance guys to go check this stuff about, every weekend. And finally, after about 4 weekends, they said, nothing's changed, but nothing has failed. So he says, do we still need to keep doing this? And I said, well, I think we found a solution here.
Yeah.
When I started hunting for a lubrication for these saws and so forth, I didn't have access to the same resources. But at any rate, I went down to this local custom motorcycle shop down here, and I said, what do you guys use for lubrication on your chains? And he pointed me to this. He said, we use nothing but that. So I tried it on these saws, and I have had exactly one failure, and I believe that was due to some solvent getting spilled on the bearing. It turned a weird color. It was unlike grease. It was almost green. So I wasn't sure who did it, so I just had the customer pay for the price of the part, and he was on his way and happy as a lark.
Jim Bashir's asked, is the Delta equivalent or similar to this mechanically? Yes, the Delta saw and the Dewalt saw are identical, except for the outer casting of the back end on the new Deltas are made a little bit different, so they don't look exactly the same.
Yeah, I think Delta comes in about 3 different versions. The first version that came out, we affectionately referred to it as a gray Dewalt.
Yes, it was identical.
Then they changed the outer casing on the thing entirely to get some product differentiation. They made it rather squarish instead of rounded. And then I think they have since done yet another cosmetic redesign on the thing, and gotten a little more radical and changed a few of the internal parts, not necessarily for the better.
Yeah, but as a whole, they're the same mechanism, same interchangeable parts.
Yeah, when you take a look at the parts diagrams for the 2 machines, for the Dewalt and the Delta, the only part numbers that are different are the cover part numbers.
Yeah. And a lot of people don't know this, but actually DeWalt purchased the rights from Excalibur years and years and years ago, and to use the basic internal components In other words, the basic machine design in their saws. They change the external look of them and everything. They're not the same externally, but the interior mechanism is basically the same on the Dewalt as it is on the original Excalibur.
Yeah, one of the ones that where they departed on that, in principle, they're the same thing. But Excalibur, on the linkage that goes from the vertical rocker to the horizontal rockers, they use two separate aluminum bars to link the front to the rear on each layer, on the bottom rocker and on the upper rocker. And what DeWalt chose to do is they stamped out a piece of sheet metal, which I thought was a much lower cost solution and lower mass. So the less amount of material that you're having to move when you go to change direction, the better.
Yes. Let's see. How many hours, Aussie Man wants to know, how many hours of work does the saw do before wear starts to happen?
I'm thinking what he's probably talking about there is a type 2, out of the box. About how many hours can you run the thing before you can expect trouble? And I'm thinking it's somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe 400 hours.
So you should lubricate it by taking it apart and greasing it up and putting it back together?
Yes.
Yes.
And are there any adjustments then that you have to make sure that you're putting it back together right or calibrated? For lack of
there's no adjustments to be made.
That's a plus.
When it goes together, it's about like, I'm sure you have dealt with one of the old 1911 firearms, right? One of the 45 caliber.
No.
Okay. I figured you kind of look like you might have been familiar with a firearm or two.
Oh, back in my day.
Yeah. Period. It's about like some of the handguns and stuff like that. You can take the thing apart, have a whole box of parts in front of you, and if you can get it back together and get the thing to cycle, there's no other calibration required.
Right. There's really only one adjustment. That I remember, and that is the adjustment on the tensioning arm up top, and that is you can loosen it or tighten it just a little to get a little bit more tension out of it. Am I correct?
It's not so much that you get more tension out of it. What you're doing is you're
lifting that front arm up.
You're controlling the height of the front arm, or the front arm.
Yeah.
And that's, like I mentioned about Hans and so forth. He wants that arm to be just as high as he can possibly get it.
Right.
So that he can get underneath those 1.5 inch and 1.75 inch squares that he likes to do compound cuts on.
That leads up to my question is, I see that rocker arm assembly is that distance is so small. What's the stroke on the blade? Is that going up 1/2 inch and down 1/2 inch, or a full inch?
About 3/4 of an inch, give or take.
3/4 total?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. In other words, the blade itself, the lift and drop of the blade is 3/4 of an inch. So basically, if you're using 3/4 inch of material, you're only using 3/4 of an inch of a blade. So you could technically cut, let's say, until the blade started getting dull, you could put a 3/4 of an inch plate or another board underneath and raise your piece up that you're cutting and use the other top part more and get another cut out of that blade.
The blade breaks before I can do that.
Yeah. But my point is I know some people that actually do that. They cut until it gets dull and then they raise up and they've got a piece that's made with a hole in it and they cut again to get that much more wear out of the blade. Roger Marr says, I just bought my first scroll saw, the 788, and is there anything I need to check on with the saw right out of the box as far as common manufacturing defects that might not be obvious.
No, I think they've gotten most of those things straightened out now. Just basically put it together. Now, out of the box, what's going to wind up happening is you got the table, and I believe it is separate from the yoke that is on the table. And so there's a bit of adjustment there to be able to get that yoke. Let's see here if I can
get the yoke properly aligned.
Yeah, to get it properly aligned.
Right.
Yeah.
I want somebody on the panel to look at Jim Dockrell's answer and tell me what the heck of that name of that grease is. Because I can't.
Okay, that circular part that I'm pointing to there, or that I'm showing in the camera, that is the yoke on the underside of the table. And there's a single screw at each end of that yoke. And there's quite a lot of play there to be able to slide the table in all directions, side to side or front to back. Now, once you get the big table nut, which is that nut there that I'm pointing at,
right?
Once you get that thing properly anchored and so forth, then is when you want to get the table adjusted such that
by some of our text-to-speech voices,
you get the blade going through the center of the hole.
Enter your own text and sample some of the languages that we offer for.
Now, what you can do to accomplish that is, slide the table side to side enough so to make it center in the hole, and then tighten up those two nuts. Those two screws that come up from the underside of the table.
Right.
And you should be that should be about the only adjustment that was needed.
Right.
Now, when they first transferred the product over to China, that was one of the things that they overlooked, because generally on a product transfer like that, you don't give up your molds on your working factory. You go over to wherever the target factory is, and you have new molds made. That was what they did on the table mold for the 788. And I guess the junior engineer that was working on that assignment over there, he didn't know how to measure or something, so they wound up that by the time you got the table installed on there was no way you could thread a blade. And they had several thousand saws out there with tables that you couldn't thread a blade, and Dewalt refused to believe they had a problem. So they eventually, swallowed their pride and decided we've heard this enough times that maybe there is a problem. So they eventually got it fixed.
Did you see that Cross Timbers Woodcraft said that his 788 cuts the smoothest silk when making straight or gentle curves, but when he makes tight curves, it clanks like it's trying to come apart. Has anyone ever experienced this?
That's usually a sign that the bearings in the rocker arms up front are going bad.
Okay, let's see if I can show this with this camera set up here. Okay, this blade clamp that I've got in my hand here, when everything is as it should be, and you've got the tension released on this, okay, accidentally got some of the thread sealer on that thread when I shouldn't have. But anyway, when you've got this thing assembled properly, there are, oops, got to get it up a little higher so you can see that. Give me a second here to remount this camera. This isn't going to work.
In the meantime, Russ,
Yes.
molybdenum disulfide?
Okay. That's how you pronounce that?
Is it
I wasn't
molybdenum?
as bad as I am with names. I sure wasn't even going to take a crack at that.
It's definitely disulfide.
Yeah, get the disulfide, but Molly, I think it's almost molybdenum.
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 Yeah, it's a CV grease. Any type of CV grease will crawl right with the chain or bearings. It'll never fling off unless you go over 2,000 RPM, but it's a CV grease. It'll crawl right along it. It'll stay right on it.
All right, back to Bob. What do you want to show us now, Bob?
Okay, yeah, what I wanted to show you is on this assembly here, I am doing my level best to try to get this blade clamp to move on this rocker and strut.
Right.
And it's not moving at all.
Right.
If you grab a hold of yours and you got a significant amount of play there, you probably need to address those two bearings and sleeves that are in there. And they're amazingly easy on the Dewalt to get those, to take this blade clamp off, and you can actually press those bearings out without having to take any other part of the machine apart.
Yeah, they come right out without any problem.
Yep. And the sleeves, you have to get those from Dewalt, unless you know some machinist that is willing to do that for cheap or free.
Yeah, I would be almost willing to bet when he says he's making real tight turns and starts making noise, that's probably where those are the bearings behind it, are probably the ones that's wore out.
Yep.
I'm trying to go back through CB grease. I love the 911. Okay. Sterling Davis asked, is there a fix for the forward-backward motion on the blade? In other words, explain to them that blade does not actually go straight up and straight down. It's got a little bit of a forward motion. You want to explain that? And
yeah, because of the because of the short pivot of those rockers in the front, they actually move up and down in an arc. So on the way down, it will actually reach out a little bit, and then when it gets past midpoint, it comes back in. So the blade travel is remaining vertical. The only thing is, it also goes forward and back. And somebody measured that just recently. I think it was like, I want to say it was like 19 thousandths of an inch. It was, it was enough that it would give some people some trouble.
right.
The other factor that I'll cover for some of the audience here, I know I had one of my local customers that called me, and I mean, tell you, he was just absolutely insistent on the fact that he had to do something to fix this. But if you stick while you've got it on the table, if you stick a 90-degree gauge between the table and the blade, and the backside of the blade is not perfectly perpendicular to the table, I have seen them off by 8 or 9 degrees. I mean, it's pretty severe.
Right.
What I did, I think I showed it in the most recent video that I did. This was one of the ones that Steve Good challenged me to try to come up with a fix for. But what we did, let's assume that this blade holder here is forcing the blade to be, we'll show it in an exaggerated fashion. Let's say the blade was sticking out that far. You know, so it was that far out of being vertical. When you go to do something like lettering, it's going to be, you know, less than satisfactory results. You know, especially if you're stack cutting a bunch of letters. They're going to be way different sizes when you get them out. So what I came up with was, for that condition where the blade is pitched too far forward, I've had some people take the set screw out of one side of the blade clamp, take the actual contact surface of the blade clamp out, stick a hacksaw in there, regular old hacksaw blade, run that thing up and down about 3 or 4 times, put the blade back in there, reassemble everything, and remeasure it. And what you will find out is you're recessing the blade in that blade clamp deeper. And you will eventually reach an absolute perpendicular. I know this one local customer of mine, he was making grandfather clocks out of wood, including the gears. And what he was unhappy about, he was already getting, you know, good yield and, you know, good works out of the gears and so forth. The only thing was that the letters were a little bit raggedy, and it was the quality of the workmanship that he had on the rest of that clock. I could see why he was just real sensitive about the looks of those letters on those Roman numerals.
Right.
So he tried that, and boy, he said that was just the ticket. You know, just take the high side of that blade and do a relief cut on the back of that blade clamp, and that'll make that blade perpendicular.
Now, on that also, have you heard of this? I have heard, and I tried it on my saw, which worked quite well, and that is on your bottom casting for the rocker, on your steel plates on the left and right, elongating those holes on that steel plate forward a little bit, so that you could push the casting forward just a slight amount and put those bolts back in it. Therefore, your bottom rocker would push forward just a slight amount to straighten out that what we want to call forward movement. Have you ever heard of that?
I have heard of that, and
you want to show them?
My response to that part is I like things that are reversible. If it doesn't work right the first time, you got in order to correct that whoops that you just created by cutting away metal on the frame, replacing this part here is pretty cheap compared to replacing it.
You want to show them what I was talking about, though?
Say again?
Can you show them what I was talking about? Do you have that plate sitting?
Let me see here. Yeah.
Now, I'm not recommending this. I tried it and it worked fantastic for me. So, but like he said, if you elongate these holes and they don't work, there is no coming back. You'll have to get another plate if it doesn't work right.
Yep. What Russ is talking about here is these 2 bolt holes here. These are clearance holes that this is. Uh-oh. All of a sudden, I got something other than your picture on here. Oh, okay, there we go, Russ.
Yeah, we're fine.
Okay. But anyway, what those holes do is they made up with a casting like this. And by elongating those holes, it permits you to slide this this casting in and out, and then tighten it down again.
Right.
But you're
If you take,
what
if
you're
you
asking the fasteners to do at that point is with the binding head screws that are attaching this casting inside of it, you're asking those things to hold that thing through all the vibration
yes,
that you're going to expose it to. And you know, if it works, you're good. If it doesn't, gotta go to plan B.
right. Well, that's what I
Might
said.
involve putting some star washers underneath it.
Make this adjustment at your own risk. Trust me. I tried it and it worked on mine, and I like the cut a little bit better, and I've had no problems. I used a star washer.
Yep.
What I call a star washer back there to really dig in to keep those screws from coming back out and vibrating, and it worked great.
Yep.
But like I said, do it at your own risk, because if you elongate those holes and it doesn't work for you, as Bob pointed out, there is no coming back.
Yeah.
Steve Carmichael wants to know, on a new saw, when you take it apart, like in other words, you've had people bring it to you and say, here, lube it up before they ever even use it. By you doing that, does that void the warranty? Is there something on there that seals it and says that if you remove this tag that it you'll void the warranty, or will they even know?
Chances are they'll never even know. I've never had a challenge on it, but technically, yes, it would void the warranty if they wanted to get nasty about it.
Right.
But my experience is that the lubrication that I do to one is not going to do anything negative to the saw. So therefore, there would be no reason to take it back to Dewalt. As a matter of fact, you're probably recommended against it.
Yeah.
The few people whose saws that I've worked on that have had it, you know, at a Dewalt service center before it came to me, they actually regretted the thing, you know, having been in Dewalt's possession.
Yeah.
Generally, what they'll do is when you take the thing to Dewalt, ask them to do something, you can expect to get the saw back somewhere between 3 and 4 months later.
Yeah.
And it won't be a bit better than when you left it off there. You'll just have a deeper hole in your pocket.
Let's see what question that I want to ask.
There's a couple of questions out there about the chuck, the blade chuck, and one of them, Sterling Davis, wanted to know if there's a benefit to the new Pegasus chuck, and then Jim Bashir's wanted to know if you run that hacksaw in the existing factory chuck, doesn't that reduce the amount of area that the clamp has to grab the blade?
No, because you're removing such a slight amount of material. The blade clamp is actually contacting the blade over 100%. In other words, the bearing in there, the actual mating surface that it's clamping against, is bigger than the flat surface of the blade. So if you're moving the thing forward or backward a slight amount, you still got 100% coverage.
Yeah, the only difference it would be was, instead of the blade being perfectly center of the bearings, it might move it slightly toward the rear.
You know, you would be moving toward the rear maybe 4 or 5 thousandths.
Right. And then
to complete the rest of that question there, you asked about the Pegasus clamp.
Yeah.
There's only 2 people that I know of that have actually tried that. One of which is Steve Good, and the other is Hans Meyer. Hans just absolutely swears by his. I mean, he is thrilled to death with that Pegasus clamp, because I don't know of anybody else in the scroll saw world that cranks out as much material or as much product as he does. And he said it makes him probably 5 to 10% more productive.
Yeah.
With the speed with which he can make blade changes.
For those of you who do not know what we're talking about, Bearwood Supply is now carrying what they call the Pegasus clamps. It's the upper and lower blade clamps on these Dewalts. Actually, it'll fit more than that, but and you can purchase them from them, and they're supposed to be. I haven't personally tried them, but I have talked to people. Steve Good has them, and that have used them, and they really, really like them and say they're a lot better. They reduce the according to them, they reduce the vibration, and they're easier to change the blade. They have several more benefits, and the reason I say that is because Bear Wood's one of my sponsors, and so if you want to see what they look like, you can go to bearwoodsupply.com and go on there, and you can see what they actually look like. If they want, and I was going to contact him and ask him if he wanted to send me a set of them. I'm willing to put them on my Dewalt saw, and I've got my Dewalt saw right here set up, so I could put them on there and run them for a while and see if I can tell a difference or whatever. So, but
well, you can get him to send you a sample right here if he sends me one.
Okay.
I've been promised one of those for about 6 months now.
Okay. Well, I'll get a hold of him and find out what's going on then.
Okay.
Yeah, like I said, I personally don't know, but now what did you hear Steve Good say about them?
Steve thinks they're quite good too. I mean, he works on so many things. I think his favorite saw is the Seiko.
Yeah.
And I think it's already got a blade clamp system that's pretty good.
Yeah, I noticed a big difference between the Seiko blade clamp system and the Dewalt. The ones on the Seiko were more like what I would consider the Pegasus than the Dewalt.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because when you get the Dewalt, one thing that I've noticed on that too is when you get the Dewalt and you first purchase it, those blade clamps hold really well. And then they start to lose their grip, so to speak. And the biggest mistake I think people make is when they start seeming to lose their grip, they start to increase the tension on which they tighten the blade down. And by doing that, that aluminum on that front is not that strong, and they're actually separating that out, which is causing more problems.
Yep.
And it's just a continuation of more tightening, more separation, more blade looseness. So, and I think the Pegasus now I've seen them and held them. They have a much the casting of the aluminum. I don't know if they're cast or whatever, but the structure of the aluminum on them seems to be a lot sturdier, a lot thicker than what the Dewalt blade clamps are.
Right. Yeah, I've got one of the guys in GWA that does an awful lot of scrolling. I can count on having to replace his blade clamps at least once a year.
Wow.
For a guy that was a professional photographer all his life, he sure has a heck of a grip. He really puts a twist on that thing.
Jim says thanks for the questions, answering the questions. Larry Bowers says he loves the Pegasus blade clamps much better, and Sterling says he has a set. He's just not had the time to put them on. Sterling Davis actually got in a car wreck and he got in a car wreck and was down for a while, but then he also broke his wrist sliding down a 100-foot slip and slide up at Tony Rulio's, I believe is how you say it, house. So, but anyway, he wasn't able to get in his shop. That's where he hadn't put his blade clamps on. Any questions from the panel? I know y'all been quiet.
Is there such a thing? Does anybody make a diamond type blade for scrolling that you can cut in any direction, or there's no such thing? You know how they take diamond chips and they epoxy them onto certain blades like saws and that? I was just curious if there was any type of blade that could be, or what's the best type of blades that you guys are familiar with that work the best
What do you want to cut?
for scrolling hard? Well, there's got to be an all-around blade like for pine or hardwood, or wasn't there one, Russ, you were talking about a back blade or something that works real well and doesn't dull?
Yeah, you're going down a path that's actually kind of long because
like
there's
everything else.
Yeah, no, I'm just there's
different
all
blades for different woods.
Yes, there is. And reason I say that is because you have skip tooth blades, which are actually pretty good when you're getting into really, really hard woods, because of the fact that they clear the path of all that. As they're cutting, that sawdust gets in there to help clear the path out. Then you have scroll reverse, or you have which teeth are going in each direction in the path. Those seem to work pretty good. So, yeah,
And then you got like spirals too.
then you got spirals, which you can cut. They basically take a flat blade and twist it 360 degrees, so it's cutting in all different directions.
Those
Those are great for portraits, so you can go omnidirectional.
Is that a good blade to learn on?
I've learned on both, and I use flat more than I use spirals, but they each have their own place. If I was doing a portrait, due to the fact that most portraits of people's faces and stuff have like your hair and everything has so many little tiny, yeah, they go in different directions. The spiral is actually the best blade for that, for cutting portraits and stuff. But if I was cutting some fretwork, or if I was cutting like a design where I put a box together that had, you can actually cut finger joints or box joints and boxes to put them together, I wouldn't want a spiral. Number one, the kerf that it cuts is really thicker. And number two, you can get straighter lines with a flat blade than you can with a spiral. So,
and thinner too.
Yeah, and thinner. Yeah, they're much better. But they also make what they call a jeweler's blade. Now, a jeweler's blade, I don't know if you've ever seen this done, but people will take quarters and put them in holders and actually drill holes in really small holes in the quarter, and actually use a jeweler's blade and cut the quarter and put designs in the quarter.
I've seen that, yes.
Yeah, so that's a jeweler's blade. So they've got blades that supposedly cut, or they do cut plexiglass. Now, I've never seen a diamond coated. I know what you're talking about, which would basically be like a spiral blade where they coated the outside of the blade with diamond dust, so to speak, so it would cut. I've never seen one of those though.
That'd be interesting to try to make one, or
According to Gwinnett Woodworkers, I think it's probably Rob Austin that's out there. He says there's a diamond blade that's used for glass.
Okay. See? Yeah, a diamond blade that you see now. That's great. Well, I'd have to check into that.
See, that's where I'm going, because now you start getting special blades. You could probably put a thin piece of aluminum on there and actually cut it.
Oh yeah,
with the right blade.
Well, yes and no. I mean,
very slow.
Yeah.
Well, if you can cut a quarter, which I don't know, I guess it's an alloy too, but I would imagine you could cut thin aluminum. I don't know which should be denser.
Yes, they will cut. They will cut. You can cut a thin or aluminum, thin aluminum. You can cut brass. That's not any problem.
As long as it's non-ferrous, you can probably.
Yeah, non-ferrous. You're not going to cut no iron or steel or anything like that. But aluminum, brass is no problem. Plexiglass. The biggest problem with plexiglass you have to learn is you got to slow the speed down and cut it slow, because what happens is the blade actually heats up the plexiglass as it's going through. So as you cut this, the cut is actually sealing behind you.
It'll gum up, right?
Yeah, right. So there is one that is good to know. Though he said there's a diamond blade for use with glass. That's very good to good to know. Just hold on one second. I lost my train of thought because there was something I was going to say. Yeah, there was something I was going to say, and I've already lost my train of thought. So on that.
We when you were talking about cutting metal and whatnot, we recently had a demo, a series of demos at Gwinnett Woodworkers where guys were cutting coins, and they used this coin holder that Marcus Bailey has made.
Yes, and
the guy that produces probably the most exquisite coins, what he does is he runs the scroll saw. He uses a jeweler's blade, and he runs it at almost the lowest possible speed. He runs it at about a 1 or a 2, and I've never seen him break a blade. And he just chisels out that coin to where there's nothing left of it by the time he gets done.
How
I saw
fast?
him make one with a pair of hummingbirds. He made this on a dime, so they were perfectly shaped. Two hummingbirds, one over the other, and there was amazingly not very much metal left when he got done, and he didn't even break a blade.
I've seen some of the stuff like that, and I'm sitting there, and I consider myself to be pretty doggone good on a scroll saw, but sometimes I see some stuff made that just amazes me.
Yep.
The question, I lost my train of thought, but I found it back again. It was the question I wanted to talk about and for you to answer was Jim Bashir's. Why is the hole in the table so large? You would think you should be able to make there like a zero clearance hole there to work with small cuts. So why is that hole in the tabletop of the Dewalt table so large, Bob?
No, I've never given any thought to why that would be. It's just, it goes all the way back to the origin of the saw. But what people have done as a workaround to that is they make their own zero clearance insert on that. One of the best of them that I've come up with is you were conversing with Rob there. He gave me a roll of some sort of a surplus dielectric that one of his customers was using to make transformers with or something, but it was really tough paper. And what I did with that was I made a hole as big as I needed for blade clearance in the center of about a 2x2 inch piece of paper. And I went ahead and threaded a blade, tensioned it up, so that I could get this loose piece of paper on the table situated where I wanted it, and then I taped it down, and I worked with that for months and months before I ever had to replace it.
Yeah.
Your downside of doing that is if you aren't quite aware of your own operation of the scroll saw, if you get too much tension against the side, you get excited about cutting whatever it is you're cutting, and you lose sight of the fact that you're pushing your object that you're cutting, pushing it, and you're deflecting the blade to the left or right. Then that's going to wind up chewing up your zero clearance,
right,
and possibly making a curvature on this piece that you're cutting where you didn't intend for it to be.
Right.
Larry Bowers just brought up a point too, that isn't the hole a little bit bigger to allow for the table to tilt?
Yeah, two things that I was going to say. Yeah, when the table tilts, if it was a perfect, let's say that the blade was 1/8 an inch in diameter. I know that's bigger than what it is, and your hole was 1/8 of an inch. Yeah, there would be no clearance whatsoever due to the fact, like Bob was saying, if you get carried away and start pushing your material, which you can do, harder than what the blade can cut, the blade will defect. It will bend. Therefore, it's going to start bending that blade, and it's going to start riding in, since it's 1/8 of an inch and the hole's 1/8 of an inch, somewhere on that table, there was going to be a wear pattern where that blade constantly wears up against it. So that's one of the reasons that I can think of the hole's a little bit larger. And then number two, yes, is when you tilt the blade or tilt the table to make angle cuts, it's definitely got to have a little bit of a clearance there for the blade tilt, or the table tilt, I mean.
And really, you look at the hole in that Dewalt, and I've got a Hegner, and the hole in the table on the Hegner is much bigger than what it is on that Dewalt.
I know. And I've seen that now. That on the Seiko is a little bit different, though. The hole in the Seiko is very small compared to the Dewalt, compared to my old Excalibur X30, and compared to a few others. It's fairly small hole. So small, in fact, I didn't have it lined up real good to the center. And when I tilted my table the first time to cut, I actually cut in or wore the side of the pad and the metal underneath. So I had to make an adjustment there. Do have a good question out here. Larry Bowers wants to know, the bearings that are in the saw, how would they be greased?
Generally, what I do is when I'm either working on an existing saw or replacing bearings in a saw, you know, on one that's been used for some period of time, I will thoroughly rinse out that bearing with mineral spirits and then blow it out with compressed air to make sure that the, you know, all the other lubrication is gone. That way you don't wind up with some sort of a odd chemical reaction that you didn't expect. So I try to get the thing as clean and dry as possible. And then I take this this lube that I was showing you, and I just use a Q-tip and go swab some of this lubrication in there, stick it inside the needle bearing, and rub it around and around about 5 or 6 times to impress some of the lubrication into the needles. That seems to be sufficient.
But every one of those needle bearings and those front, your blade holders and all in the rocker arms, you basically have to disassemble all that to get to them. There is no way of squeezing any grease in any of those needle bearings on any of that rocker arm assembly or the blade holders without disassembling that that part.
Right.
So if you're thinking I can just go get a something and squirt some grease in there, it's got to come apart in order to get it in there.
Yep.
And don't try putting a liquid lubricant like WD-40 or blast, or I mean anything like that, or even silicone in there, thinking that you're going to you can just squirt some in there and that'll work fine. First off, you're going to thin whatever grease is left in there to the point it's going to be no good anymore, and you're going to find out real quick that that lubricant that you just squirted in there is not sufficient, and you're going to burn the bearings up.
A word about the WD-40. It is really a solvent and cleaner, so it will wash away any lubrication that's in there, even wheel bearing grease. It'll just flush it out completely. And what is replaced instead is this cleaner, which is WD-40. And when that evaporates, you've got some absolute bare metal there that, depending on what area of the country you're in, you know, like I'm in Georgia, it's got some of the highest humidity in the country.
Yeah.
I think Florida even runs behind Georgia.
Yeah.
But at any rate, the customer brought me one machine that he had gotten back from Dewalt. He had paid Dewalt to go through and overhaul the entire machine. And I think if you guys have seen the rates on that, I think it's in the just under $300 range for them to go completely through a saw. And what they had done is they'd gone through it, they lubricated it with WD-40. It started making noise on him within 2 months of getting it back from Dewalt. He wasn't about to take it back because it took him 4 months to get his saw back from him the first time. And it took less than 2 months for the thing to self-destruct. He brought it over to me, and it was all I could do to get the saw apart. The rust was so bad.
Wow.
And I had to replace every bearing in the saw.
Jimbo says, but most of the needle bearings are sealed. No, not in the Dewalt.
They're what is considered open needle bearings.
Yeah.
There's only one sealed bearing in the machine, and that's that bearing that's at the back of the connecting rod.
Yeah. You know what people are saying, WD-40 is basically fish oil. It does have fish oil in it. That is true. And when WD-40 was invented, it is the WD stands for water displacement 40.
Yep.
What it was originally designed for was to displace water out of areas where water was in the bearings or the places where you didn't want them, so to speak. So it's not really a lubricant as you would think as a lubricant. It was actually, and the 40 came from, that was their 40th try in making the formula to make it work. So yeah. water displacement 40.
Would that be an application for dry lube, maybe like a graphite powder?
I missed the application for
like a graphite powder or some sort of a dry lube.
it doesn't leave very much behind. I would feel a lot more comfortable with a graphite powder type lube. Some of that stuff that you spray in.
Yeah.
I would chase the WD-40 with that.
The reason I asked, I've had my 788 since 2006. I'd probably say 4,000 to 5,000 hours on it. And a couple of years ago, I went through your video series on how to do maintenance and whatnot on a saw. I took it all apart and checked all the bearings, checked everything out. Everything seemed to be nice and tight. So I said, okay, this is great. Maybe I'm one of the lucky ones. Put it all back together. And that was a couple of years ago, and I still have not had any problems with it. And I did not lube it at that time. I did use a couple of splashes of graphite in the front where the blade chuck is.
Yeah.
Other than that, I have not lubed that thing at all, and it still runs fine. I must be one of the lucky ones. Like I said, I got probably 5,000 hours on it.
Is that a Type 1 or Type 2 saw?
It's a Type 2. I bought new in 2006.
I'm really surprised because they traditionally did not use any form of lubricant when they made that machine.
Which is better, a Type 1 or a Type 2?
All depends on whether you like even or odd numbers.
The Type 1 was made in Canada.
The difference that I have seen between the two is the part of the manufacturing process of the Type 1 called for lubricating the bearings. The Type 2 saws, Dewalt considered that the manufacturer of the bearing was putting some lubrication in there, and they decided that was good enough for them. Plus the fact some of the cost engineers looked at it, they said, well, if we put lubrication in there, that's going to make it last too long. If we leave it out, the thing is going to fail, and they're going to go buy another saw.
Yeah. I agree that I think that's I think that's also a lot of the things that we buy nowadays. I've had my washer and dryer repaired before, and I've talked to some of those repair people, and they've told me that the appliances nowadays, those appliances that we used to have that lasted 20 or 30 years, the appliances nowadays that we buy are basically disposable. In other words, they're set to last for so many washing, so many cycles or whatever, and then you replace them. So they're doing that to make you buy more stuff, and I really believe that.
Just like everything else.
Yeah, and I think that goes
obsolescence.
Yep, I think that goes through.
The only manufacturer that I'm aware of that hasn't bought into that is Fisher-Price.
Yeah.
That makes kids' toys. I mean, those things are about indestructible.
That's for sure. Really, some really good questions out there. I really appreciate y'all guys. And also, guys, we got had like a little over 50 people watching tonight. Right now we got 46, and I only got 26 thumbs up. So if y'all don't mind, the rest of y'all out there that haven't done it yet, go ahead and hit that thumbs up for me and give me a thumbs up that you like this, because I think we've covered a lot of fantastic information tonight about the Dewalt. And I personally, if you wanted to get what I would consider a good scroll saw to learn on, and also that's going to last you for a while, especially if you did some of the things that Bob has talked about tonight about the maintenance on it, lubricating and everything else, I would not hesitate at all to recommend the Dewalt, the DW788. It is a great saw, and either it or the Delta, they're both pretty much exactly alike. And if you can catch them on sale, and like I said, for those of you who have joined us that didn't hear in the beginning, Grizzly right now, Grizzly Industrial, they have the Dewalt 788 with the stand and the light for $399. That's about as cheap as you're going to get it. The stand alone usually sells for somewhere between $100 to $125, depending on where you buy it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the light's another $30 usually for that saw. So you're getting somewhere around $130 off of the price of that saw. So that's a very, very good buy. So if you're and like I said, I would highly recommend it. I've had mine for years. It's cut fantastic. I bought a Delta at first, and the Delta, I wore it, some of the bearings went bad on it. And so I was in the middle. How I got the Dewalt is I was in the middle of some projects that I had contracted out, and I needed a saw like bad, like now. I went into my local Craigslist and looked, and there's a guy that was about 45 miles from me that had the Dewalt 788 that belonged to his father-in-law. He said it's like brand new. It's only been used like 4 or 5 times, and he was selling it for $250. I immediately got on the phone and called him. I said, "Hey, have you had anybody? Are you still got that saw?" And he goes, "Actually, yeah." And I goes, "Have you had any calls?" He says, "Actually, you're the first one." I said, "I tell you what, I am on. Don't sell it. I am on my way right now. I will be there in about an hour to get it and buy it and take it home from you." And he goes, he got my name and my phone number and everything else. And I walked straight into my wife's, where she was in her office, and said, "Sweetheart, I'm out the door. I'm going to go buy me a saw." Drove straight down there, bought it from him, and he was right. It looked like brand. I plugged it in. It looked like brand spanking new. Brought it home, hooked it up, and I've been using that thing ever since. So it's been fantastic.
You probably went in and said, "Hey, Nancy, can I have $250?
Actually, no. You know, our money is separate. I can buy whatever I want. So,
did you use the Camaro to get it?
Actually, I did, because it was quicker in the Camaro and cheaper on gas to go in the Camaro. So I drove her Camaro down there to get it, set it in the back. It wouldn't fit in the trunk, so I let the top down and set it in the back seat.
I love my convertible too. I've set stuff in the back like that. Let
the top down and set it in the back seat. Drove home, let the top down, and took it back out. So
there were some questions out there about where to get the bearings, when to lubricate and stuff. Now I heard that you've got a series. Is it on YouTube or?
Yeah, it's on YouTube. If you look up Gwinnett Woodworkers,
okay,
we've got about 350 videos out there. Then if you look up my name, I've done probably 6 or 7 videos out there having to do with the overhaul of the 7088.
Where do you buy your parts from for your when you repair them?
The needle bearings I get from VXB. That's Victor X-Ray Bravo.com. They're out in California somewhere. On most of my scroll saw videos, if you go down in the text portion of the description, in other words, you get to see about maybe 3 or 4 lines of description. If you expand the description to read more, I've got links in there to documents that has the part numbers for the bearings and contact information for VXB. Now, as far as the sleeves and some of the other parts, like the connecting rod, you have to go. You got no choice but to go to DeWalt on those.
Or have you ever tried replacement parts?
Replacement parts has a few of those things, like the blade clamps and everything having to do with the blade clamp. But that's about the extent of it.
Yeah.
Do you have an approximate cost for replacing all the needle bearings?
All of the bearings?
Yes.
Yeah. If somebody came into you and like all the bearings were bad on the front, like the rocker arms and the blade holders and everything, about what cost would you say that would cost somebody to do?
Well, usually what I do is like on a rocker arm and stuff like that, I'll repopulate the bearings in there rather than replace the rocker arm. It's going to be far cheaper.
Right.
But still, if you had to replace all the bearings in one of these saws and the associated sleeves, you're probably looking at about $200 to do that. So you're looking at just short of the price of a new saw.
Yeah. If you were like an car insurance company, once the value of the if you get in a wreck and the value goes over 50, I think it's 50 or 60% of the value of a car, they usually total the car. So
yeah.
So if you go ahead and if you paid $400 for the car and it's going to cost you 200 plus or a little over 225, so to speak, and bearings and stuff, you might even want to look at buying a new saw.
Saw and keep the old one for parts.
Yeah, keep the old one for parts. Exactly. Any more questions? We've tried our best, and if you have a question right now that we haven't gotten to or answered for you, if you will go ahead and type it in now so we can see it again. I usually try to tell people I didn't. If we don't answer your question, type it in a couple of times so we can see it, because this thing scrolls by, and I know I've got the panel helps me watch out for questions, but still sometimes we miss one. So right now is the time to ask it again if you haven't.
I think Ossiman is asking which is better. What do you say, Seiko or Excalibur, and why? I guess that's not a Dewalt question.
You have your preference, Bob?
I've not spent very much time with anything other than a Dewalt. I think I have sat in front of a Seiko for maybe 10 minutes at the outside, and an Excalibur. The only one of those I had any experience with was Hans bought one. He bought one of the old 30-inch Excaliburs, thinking that he wanted that deep throat, and it took him maybe 10 or 15 minutes to tear that thing up, and he brought it to me with great big alligator tears and said, "Can you fix it?" I had to wind up manufacturing a new connecting rod for that machine.
Wow.
So that started out with taking a billet of aluminum and drilling a couple of holes in it, and then start shaping the thing to make it look like a connecting rod.
I haven't had now I take that back. I've got an older EX30 Excalibur, the older purple one, and that's a good saw. If you want, I had some bearings that when I got it were bad in it, and I had to replace, even though I was told it was nothing wrong with it. But once I got the bearings replaced, I mean it's fine. It works great. I just don't like. It's got a very small table for the EX30, and I just didn't like the feel. I can't explain it, but I didn't like the feel of how it cut. And if I wanted to do some big patterns and everything, I would definitely pull it out of the, knock the cobwebs off of it and use it. So I can't say as far as an Excalibur, there is a difference between night and day when it comes to the DeWalt and the Seiko. I mean, it's sturdier, less vibration, much bigger table, which makes it a lot better. I love the magnetic pad that he came up with to put on top. I really like that, and because it doesn't scratch your table. And if that wears out, you pay $20 or so and get a new one and put back on it. So I like that. It's a better saw. I really like the way it cuts. But I've never used basically the Seiko with some modifications, and the way they design it for the table, it's because it's more built into this table. It is an Excalibur, and so is that the King now that they're selling the King scroll saw.
Right,
that's an Excalibur.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but that's as far as I can tell you. Does Seiko have the same bearing problems as the DW788? No, they don't have the same. As far as lack of lubrication, no, they're lubricated better than what the DeWalt puts into theirs. So now, as far as maintenance, yes, if you put lots and lots of hours on this, it's just like driving your car. You need to change the oil every once in a while. You need to, lubricate the front end, the tie rod ends, and the ball joints and stuff like that. So any kind of mechanical thing that you normally use, requires some kind of a maintenance. So I would say I don't think I'm going to ever have a problem with the Seiko as far as I don't use it as much. But if you're into more of a production where you scroll on this thing 8 or 9 hours a day, every single day, I would say yes. You were even on the Seiko, you're going to have some kind of maintenance on it sooner or later. Jimbo wants to know if I've ever heard of a group called the Cracker Wood Shop in Ocala. No, I have not heard of that. I was going to Jim Bashir says, I was going to buy an Excalibur when I found out it came with the Lady in the Lake and my wife wouldn't let me. He's talking about something that we're not off the subject.
You're not going there, right?
Yeah. Has anyone ever heard of or used an RBI Hawk saw? What do you think of that? I have not used one, but I've heard of an RBI Hawk, and they're supposed to be very good. You have any thoughts on that, Bob?
Again, I know people who've used it, don't have any strong opinion one way or the other.
Yeah. He's a DeWalt 788 man. On an average, do you whenever someone or as many as you've repaired on an average, what is your average price for repair as far as when somebody brings one in you and it usually has what normally they have go wrong with them? What is about the cost of having one fixed?
Well, the simple fix to them is some of them require just lubrication. I charge $85 for that to disassemble the saw, clean it thoroughly, put new lubrication in it, and run it and verify that the thing is, just as quiet as a new Type 1. And then if it requires some new bearings or sleeves or something like that, I'll address that, and it's the cost of parts.
Okay. That's actually cheap, Bob.
Yeah.
I mean, $85, I might box mine up and send it to you.
I have had 4 different people, I think it is, from outside the metro Atlanta area. One lady out in Oklahoma did so, and another lady in Dallas, and mostly out in the Midwest there somewhere. They have boxed up saws and sent them to me. Said, "Here, fix it."
Wow, that's good.
Let me know how much it costs.
Have you ever had anybody say, "Here, fix this," and you say, "Oh, it's going to be this, and then it's going to be this," and then they say, "Oh, never mind. Here, keep the saw."
I had one guy do that, yeah. Except he used the saw. Then he finally decided that was his livelihood.
Oh.
So he said, really, I'd feel more comfortable with getting a new saw. He said, let me get a new saw, and he did that and delivered it to me unopened. And said, here, take it apart, lubricate it.
Lubricate this one, yeah.
And I'll give you the other saw.
Not a bad deal.
Yeah.
Especially if there wasn't catastrophic failure on the other one or anything like that. Just needed lube.
Jumbo wants to know about the Q3. Jimmy's already answered that. He's never used anything other than a DeWalt and been around a DeWalt. So, and I've never used a Q3.
What is it? A Q3?
A Q3. Yeah, scroll saw.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken, that particular saw is one of the only saws that actually has a, I want to say 90 degree. In other words, the blade actually goes straight up and down in that saw. But it's designed differently from what these saws that we're working on.
The Q3 from Delta had a graphite arm, and it's a C-arm type machine.
Yeah.
So, and they're notoriously bad in vibration.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was one of those type of saws that had a big spring to it. It was almost like a valve spring on a V8.
Yeah.
And it pulled against that. I think it was, I know Craftsman made a version of it. I'm not sure if other people did.
Yeah.
But, one of the guys that I know, Paul Search, that he uses a scroll saw an awful lot. And he said he liked using it, especially when he needed up and down travel. But he said if it ever broke a blade, he said you'd about wet yourself. It said it sounded like somebody firing off a shotgun next to you.
I'll bet. I'll bet. All right. So, yeah, that's pretty well all the questions that I see out there winding down. So, like I said, you know, for the amount of money, you cannot go wrong buying a 788. You know, you're going to have, if you're it would be in your best interest if you purchase one brand new to go ahead and take it out and use it for a while. But I would, after a period of time, definitely look into go ahead and either having it done, like get a hold of Bob, or watching his videos and lubricating, especially if you're not if you're not mechanically inclined enough to get real deep down into the saw, especially the blade holders and those front rocker arms. Those are real easy to take apart. They are. I mean, that was the first thing I did was take them things apart on front. They're real easy to take apart and put back together, and they're real easy to take apart and lube them up and put them back together. And that within itself will help that saw last a lot longer. Because those bearings that are up front are really exposed to everything you do on the saw. In other words, all the sawdust, anything that you're cutting, those are not sealed bearings. So there's a possibility for that stuff to get in there and contaminate that and help thicken the grease or mess with the grease to the point that it could cause your bearing failure. So if you could just do that alone, it would probably save you a lot of money. But yeah, I wouldn't. If something happened tomorrow, if somebody, I wouldn't hesitate to buy another one if I needed it. If I couldn't fix mine, I wouldn't hesitate to. I mean, I got the Seiko, but what I'm talking about is I had the Dewalt before, and if I didn't have the Seiko and that Dewalt went down, if I couldn't repair it, I would not hesitate to go buy another one. Dennis Goodson. It's Goodson. Sorry, I had to look twice. Dennis Goodson says, a very, very interesting show, as usual, but I do love my Seiko ST21. I'm curious to try the DeWalt. Yeah, I'll get the ST21's up. Seiko ST21 is a fantastic saw, no doubt about it. I love mine. Jimbo is signing out and saying, see y'all. So, yeah, we're fixing to close out here.
Okay, I think that Seiko SC21, isn't it better part of 1,000?
Yeah, it's I think right now he has it on sale, so I think right now it's around 800. But usually, yeah, it's up there around $1,000. They're about $1,000, which is about $500 or $600 more expensive than a DeWalt.
Yeah.
Now, if you want to go back, just real quick before we close out here, if you want to go back and look at some of these, like the Craftsman scroll saws, the help me out here. So what are some of the cheaper ones?
Porter
Cable, Craftsman,
Delta.
No, not the
Harbor
Delta.
Freight.
The Harbor Freight. That's a boat.
Well, he said some other ones.
Yeah, but those right there. What'd you say?
Ryobi.
The Ryobi. Yeah. The Porter Cable is of those cheaper saws like that on the low end, happens to be one of the better of those saws on the low end. But there's a difference between night and day from that Porter Cable up to the DeWalt. So really, to be honest with you, there's no really comparison. Now, I that being said, I know people are saying, well, I've got a Porter Cable and I do this and I do that and it works great and it does great for me. Hey, I've seen some fantastic work turned out on scroll saws that I would consider a piece of crap. But these guys can use them. They work with them. They've had them for years, and they're doing fantastic, beautiful scroll saw work. More power to them. But I use this analogy in a lot of things, you know, and that is, I describe the difference between a Volkswagen and a Mercedes-Benz. I mean, the difference between night and day. Yes, both of them will get you there to work, but one of them's a hell of a lot better to drive. You know, so and of the I want to say the mid-range scroll saws, the DeWalt, it and its twin brother, the Delta, are fantastic saws for the amount of money, and people use them for years and years and years and produce some fantastic, beautiful work out of them. So,
well, the low end saws are great to find out if you're actually into scroll sawing. You know, and if you find out you hate it, you love it, whatever, then you're not out a lot of money. But if you love it, you can always upgrade to your mid-range, your mid-ranges, your Dewalt, your Porter cable. And if you love it that much, by all means, you got the money, go big, go big or go home.
But it also, in that same aspect, I've seen people that bought the Harbor Freight scroll saw and used it and got so dadburn aggravated with it that they threw it away and, you know, and said they'd never scroll again. Had they bought or used a DeWalt in the very beginning, I guarantee you their scroll saw experience would have been different.
Sterling Davis, I believe, started out on a Harbor Freight.
He did. I think he did too. I believe that too. And I know a couple other people that started out on a Harbor Freight. So
even with that, it's on his work was phenomenal.
Yeah.
Really made some nice stuff with that Harbor Freight.
Yeah, yeah. But ask him, if he's still in the chat, ask him once he got his DeWalt, like, holy crap, he thought he was in heaven.
So them saws are better than my 2 chipmunks and fishing line, you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a shop tool, so I imagine if I went to a DeWalt, it would be a huge difference.
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to close out here, guys. It's past Bob's. Gwinnett Woodworkers put in there, it's past Bob's bedtime. Who is that that's on the Gwinnett Woodworkers saying that, Bob?
Yeah, that's probably Rob.
Rob. Oh, Rob Austin.
He sent me a text message the same way.
Okay. Okay, Rob. Okay, we won't keep him up too much longer, I guarantee you. We'll go on to bed. All right. Bob, I so much appreciate you being on here tonight and giving all this great information and showing us all this on the DeWalt. Thank you very, very much. I appreciate it.
Anytime. I'm glad to help.
No problem. And yeah, we might have you on in the future. We'll do this again sometime, depending on how many questions and emails and stuff I get on the show. Sometimes these go over so good that I have so many emails and email questions that we'll do one of these in the future.
Okay.
All right. And thank you all those who've been out there. Dennis Goodson, Dan Inge, Jim Dockrell, Michelle Marcoux, all of you've been out in the chat and all the fantastic questions that y'all have fielded from out there. Thank you, Brenda, Chris, Dickinson, John, Al, and Paul for being on here tonight. And there's only one thing we got left to do before we close out, and that is just give me sawdust, lots of sawdust all around me and everywhere. I like it flying all around my shop and even in my beard and hair. Good night, everybody. Thank you for watching, and God bless.
Bye, y'all.
Good night, everyone. You guys have a nice.
Bye. Remember, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. Move along.
Good night.
Move along.